Hey everyone, William here with the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary Series, and we are in 1936 today for the last time, but we'll talk about that later. Wow, I'm rather overwhelmed at how many people watched this little short I posted yesterday. Over 500. I wish the actual video series, the individual ones, got that kind of view, those kind of views. Yeah, it was just like a 40-second what's the word, not really a discussion, but interaction with one of my friend's twin sons who's in kindergarten, and he'd watched a few minutes of one of the Dmitri videos that I was showing to someone, and I noticed that he was watching it rather intently, although he didn't watch the whole thing. But then, a few minutes later, he came up to me, and I didn't even realize it was recorded, and he started talking about it, and that was very interesting. And, I don't get it. 1949? Well, I never mentioned 1949, so I don't know where that came from, but I was impressed. I was impressed by his attentiveness and his desire to understand it. Anyway, I want to note as well that the picture I posted as the thumbnail for this video is of Kirill's casket with an honor guard of Young Russia members. So I thought it was interesting. What we're doing today in 1936, of course, doesn't reference that at all. That was still in the future in 1938. But since this is our last 1936, and I'm running out of photos anyway, I thought, okay, this shows the presence of Young Russia in sort of at, you could say, Kirill's court or quasi-court or whatever you want to call it. Okay, our recap for 1915, we had Dmitri and Paul discussing the latest war news, and we had Sandro apparently expressing some interest in Maria as a potential romantic interest. I don't know why that didn't go anywhere. Maybe she wasn't that wild about him. In 1936, our last video, we had this interesting reference to Kremlin money, to the allegation that Young Russia was receiving funds from the Soviets. And just Dmitri's really angry in these about, well, it's personal for him, but also just the apparently, he says, blind criticism and blind attacks from people outside the Young Russia Party who never bothered to discuss any of this with the Young Russians themselves. So we're continuing on from that, and here we go. For 16 years, you have not shown your monarchical feelings in anything but the nomination of Grand Duke Nikolai Nikolaevich as national leader under the banner of not making a premature decision. I'm just going to make a note of national instead of dynastic here. Okay, the nomination of Grand Duke Nikolai Nikolaevich as national leader under the banner of not making a premature decision. And now you find yourselves in some kind of conflict with the dynasty. What could we learn from you? Explain to us not only our mistakes, but also your own intentions, your path forward, your point of view, your program, and your judgment about the restoration of the Russian monarchy. But no, with all the will in the world, you can't manage it because you're completely focused on the past. You're absorbed in your own memories, and there is too much egotism in your political views. You don't love Russia. You set conditions for her to earn your love. You manage somehow to dissociate yourself from reality. You deliberately avoid taking responsibility for outlining any monarchist program that would be applicable to today's Russia. The difference between you and us is this. We, young Russians, love Russia. We love it above all else. We follow what's happening there. We know what the monarchy can only be resurrected in a living Russia by Russians living on Russian soil. You would like to create a monarchy through teary-eyed reminiscences and lamentations about the past that was great but is now gone. And you forget that in spite of the unacceptable government, in spite of the vile regime, Russian life is constantly evolving. Russia is renewed, growing, and becoming stronger, and so too is the Russian man reborn. But we do not forget our responsibility to the head of the Russian imperial house. We are doing the work of the sovereign, calibrating it directly to Russian reality. We will justify the confidence which the head of our dynasty has always placed in us. A new proof of this trust is my own appointment as chairman of the main council of the Young Russian Party and as his representative for France. Let us be steadfast, stoic, and patient. May the Young Russia Party grow in size and strength for the glory and greatness of Russia and the Tsar. Okay, boy, it just really is a pity that we don't have a recording of him delivering this. And seeing if he did it with real sort of fire-breathing passion, or, kind of, I don't think he could have, spoken these particular words in a sort of really, with a sort of really calm demeanor. That I made a little note of. It's interesting that he refers to Grand Duke Nikolai Nikolaevich's nomination to be a national leader, a leader of what nation? I guess Russia, and not a dynastic leader. So there are different accounts of Nikolasha's position at that time, and we know some people say that he was the chosen, by a lot of Russians, the chosen emperor in exile, and even that he was making a bid for that. And I just don't see that as being true. Maybe there were some people who said, oh yes, he would make a good emperor. That's certainly likely, but there was no kind of organization to bring that about that was working to him, working on his behalf and with him, as there would be with Kirill. So I'm doubtful about that. And if you remember what Dmitri said in 1921, he went to see Nikolasha about different things, about the Sokolov papers and about Kirill. And if he had sensed that Nikolasha had any ambitions with respect to the throne, I'm sure he would have mentioned that, and he would have disparaged that. And it was always my understanding that, yes, there expressly one branch of the immigration wanted Nikolai Nikolaevich to be the head of the family and to be a leader of the immigration. But I've never seen any reference to him doing that in the capacity of being the future monarch. All right, anyway, I was a bit long-winded on that, but after all, this is the last video from 1936, so anyway, if we subtract the 13 years, or how many years, 16 years, as that Dmitri cites, then that would have put it in 1920, that people were making this appeal to have Nikolai Nikolaevich as the leader of the immigration. And I think, I think that's quite likely, although he was pretty retiring. Okay. This idea, I've talked all along about how a lot of these ideas are things that Dmitri had and convictions that he had before Young Russia even existed. But in this instance, he's done a real about-face, because he talks about the banner of not making a premature decision, and he's criticizing this as these particular monarchists being far too lukewarm and all their emphasis was on not making a premature decision with respect to, I guess, to the program, the monarchist program, and the chosen monarch. Well, you know, that was Dmitri's banner. What was he saying in 1921 if it wasn't over and over again? And in 1920, it's too early. It's too early to make a decision, and we need, you know, there needs to be a consensus in Russia itself. So that was absolutely his banner, and now he's either forgotten or he's pretending that it wasn't. This conflict with the dynasty, he's saying that he refers to this high monarchist council, and that was formed in, I was mispronouncing it in the last video. I was saying Reichenbad, but it's actually Reichenhalle, or Reichenhall. I can't remember which. I'm not even sure if it was in Austria or Germany, but southern anyway. And yeah, I don't know if it was the same council that was formed in Reichenhall in 1921, because I thought that council was completely on board with Kirill because of Ducky being so, you know, pro-fascist, and so I'm confused about that. But he's now accusing this group of having a conflict of some kind with the dynasty, merely because, I believe, merely because they reject young Russia. And so that in Dmitri's eyes is that they have a conflict with the dynasty, as though Kirill alone can represent the dynasty. Yeah, I mean, this is one thing that was consistent with him, a consistent criticism back in 1921, that when he was a member of the Trepov group, centrist, mainly people who'd been in the ministries, in the upper echelons of the government before the revolution, and his constant frustration with them is that they didn't want to take the changes in Russia into account. They wanted to sweep the Bolsheviks away and reinstate the status quo, and Dmitri quite rightly understood that wasn't going to work. He talks about egotism in political views, that people just want to go back to being big wheels in Russia, I guess. I mean, there was plenty of egotism everywhere. Good Lord, Kazembek had a massive ego, you know. And Dmitri, although he had a lot of insecurity and self-doubt, he definitely had an ego as well. Okay, you know, the harshest thing that he's saying to them is just that they don't love Russia. And, you know, if it was me in this situation of exile and people leveled that accusation, you don't love your country, well, that would be probably the ultimate insult. But, yeah, he's at that point. He's at that point with this people whom he feels so personally and politically attacked by. I love the way he puts that. As we know, he can be a very poetic writer and speaker. So this quote, "We know that the monarchy can only be resurrected in a living Russia by Russians living on Russian soil." Yeah, that's so nice, and sort of, you know, amen to that. It's true. It could not be renewed from the outside in the form of, you know, superannuated ideas and reality. And yeah, I just love the way he puts that. Then he adds the monarchy was great in the past, but now that's gone. And that was a very important realization. And it was something the Romanovs needed to realize too. But Dmitri doesn't go there. That, you know, there was a dynasty and a monarchy in Russia once. Now it's gone. And you know what? It's not coming back. Be realistic. Okay. His references to evolution, renewal, rebirth, the Russian man is reborn. You know, very beautiful, very beautiful. And you know, it's the right ideas, right? It's the right ideas. It's just too utopian. Okay, the way he's referring to Kirill, he uses Gasudar, sovereign. He uses head of our dynasty. By our, does he mean himself and the other Romanovs, or does he mean the monarchist emigres en large? I don't know. And he uses the word Tsar, which is very, very rare. You know, Russian rulers became emperors and empresses as of 1724, when Peter the Great succeeded in making Russia an empire. And the word Tsar, after that, was merely used for sentimental reasons. You know, it was kind of a lesser atavistic title. Whenever it's used, it's, you know, indicating this sort of sentimental idea of the Tsar as the little father of the Russian people. Okay, this is interesting that he says that, you know, here's a little bit of the egotism, quite frankly, that he says that he himself is the living proof that young Russia has Kirill's trust, the sovereign's trust, because Kirill has approved and perhaps even suggested that Dmitri should be made the chairman of the Young Russia High Council of the Young Russia Party. What was it called officially? The chairman of the main council of the Young Russia Party. Okay. And he adds also Kirill's representative in France, although that was much earlier on. That was in 1923. After Dmitri had, well, you know, the details are still unknown to me because he'd been so antagonistic toward Kirill that suddenly in 1923 he chucked it all and said, yes, I'm on board with you. And Kirill named him named him his own representative in France. And I think this is maybe because Dmitri, who'd always had such a passionate desire to be involved in politics, realized that his own attempts had been, you know, a wash. And so under Kirill's organization, he could have an important role and he could do what he'd always wanted to do. Okay, so what do we have next time? Well, as I said, we're going to leave 1936. The diaries were kept only intermittently in the 1930s. In the early 30s, there's hardly anything. In 1935, you have quite a bit. In 1938, you have quite a bit. In 1939, you have quite a bit. The other years are pretty much empty, alas, because it's such an interesting time in Dmitri's life. You know, in 1935, his marriage was already pretty much kaput. It was actively falling apart. And I think that's sort of when he started being more engaged with his diary again and needing to express himself. Okay, so now, yeah, I thought about it, what to do. We could go forward to Shots Out, but I thought, look, we're already immersed in 1915, so let's just do that. Let's just keep going with that. So from now on, well, not from now on, but from now until we're finished with 1915, yeah, we'll just be doing 1915, and there's almost no year in the diaries that starts in January and ends in December. He will have periods of time. Maybe that's not true, because I think 1920, 1919, 1920, 1918, I think those are full years. But in the case of 1915, no. Once he went to headquarters, he wasn't keeping his diary. But, you know, for what we have, it's good long diary entries. It's not just, you know, a couple of notes. And so it's not going to take terribly long to finish 1915. So I thought, yeah, let's do that. So what do we have in the next 1915 video? Well, we have the Duke of Leuchtenberg, Sandro's sister, turning up as one of the visitors at Dmitri's palace while he's recuperating. And her name was Yelena. I can't remember her patronymic. And we have Maria leaving. And so she will be returning to her own duties, whereas Dmitri is still on leave. So yeah, come back for that. Should be fun, and I'll see you then. Bye.